Hello guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be doing a tier list of all of the Cuphead bosses, how hard they are, how difficult they are to be beaten on regular, my opinions here. Let's go ahead and let's start here then. Okay, so we got the root pack. They're probably the very first boss that appears on the screen. So first off in the root pack you have the potato guy. He's not very difficult though. This is on regular only. On expert he actually gets a bit of a buff there, but of course the root pack is not very difficult at all. If you can't beat the root pack, if you're struggling with the root pack, then, maybe this game isn't for you. So I'm going to put it at one of the easiest. The onions aren't too bad on regular. The only part that's a bit annoying is maybe the carrots. And the carrots part is a bit annoying and maybe long for such an early boss. But it already introduces you a little bit to the boss mechanics of the game. Alright, so next up we have Cuphead Grande here. And this guy's got his glove, right? I don't really rate this guy. I think he's also another one where he's similar to the root pack. Not much difficulty in the battle. If you just use your dash for the gravestone, you shouldn't have much of a problem there. I think that's one of the harder parts of the level. And he can also duck under, his when he charges his face at you or when he puts his glove like that, it can continue shooting at him. Even though you have the early weapons in the game, I feel like these bosses aren't too difficult at all. So Cuphead de Grande similarly is going to be one of the easiest bosses. But if I was to say which of these two will be the easiest, I'm going to be putting the root pack. Absolutely is going to be the easiest boss of to be beaten on regular, in my opinion. Alright, so next up we have Cagni Carnation. This is where my first death was when I played this game. It was actually on Cagni Carnation. A bit disappointing, but Cagni Carnation can actually be not one of the easiest because it can actually be a bit challenging, especially for the last phase. It's not too easy for a beginning boss. So I'm not going to put one of the easiest for Cagni Carnation. I'm going to put kinda easy. It's nothing that could give too much of a challenge for someone if they were replaying this game. It's not one of the bosses you really gonna struggle with in terms of playing the game. Well, if you are very good at the game, you shouldn't have a problem with this. But maybe some people would struggle. But all the bosses are supposed to be hard in this game, so don't feel offended if I put your bosses on the lower tiers. It's just I'm gonna be putting them on all the tiers because that's the basis that I'm gonna be rating them on. Is compared to other bosses, this isn't that difficult. Cagni Carnation's kind of easy. All right. So, Ribian Croaks. These guys are actually a little bit scary, alright? And these guys for IL1 boss is not too easy. It's one of the harder IL1 bosses, and I don't know. I'd still say that they're kind of easy, but I don't know. I rate them a little bit more in terms of difficulty, especially when you go to actually get the S grade on here. I actually struggled with the S grade on Ribian Croaks, but just beating them on regular, I'd say that's I'd say that they go on kinda easy, but not as easy as Cagni Carnation, in my opinion. Alright, so Hildeberg is next. And Hildeberg, I'm gonna be more of the same, really. I didn't really struggle with the playing fights on regular too much, though Hildeberg can be mean, especially when you're going to S-grade her as well. So yeah, the RNG can be a bit rough on this one, but it's not too bad. And again, I'm going to be putting this kind of easy, but I'm going to put Ruby and Croaks as the hardest boss to defeat in Isle 1, and I'm going to put Hildeberg as second for the moment. So that's it. That's our one. All of them are in the bottom two tiers, in my opinion. All right, let's go to the next one. We've got Baroness von Bon Bon here. And the first boss you're probably going to be fighting, or maybe the second boss. But she's one of the first bosses you're probably going to fight in Owl 2. Baroness von Bon Bon is kind of tricky because there is a bit of RNG when you go to fight the bosses, and the mini bosses that come out of her castle. So that can be quite annoying. Baroness von Bon Bon, I did die once to her when I played this game. But the castle phase where the candy ball is rolling at you, I feel like that part is actually a little bit tricky with the head flying around. It takes a bit of getting used to that. But for her, I'm actually going to be putting her at mid, right? I think she's actually kind of difficult with the RNGs, and it can pose some people some of a challenge. I definitely think that it's not too easy to be her on regular. Alright, next up we have Beppy the Clown, and I never rate this guy. This guy is actually easy, alright? So, I absolutely think that this guy is not difficult at all. And I'm probably going to be rating Beppy the Clown on the kind of easy tier because, when you go to the first one, the first part is not too hard, right? The ducks at the top, you can just defeat them in one hit. When the balloons come out and the coaster might be a problem to some people, but just parrying the nose shouldn't be too difficult. I didn't find that one too difficult. I one-shot Beppy the Clown, so I'm going to be putting him at before Hildeberg on the kind of easy tier as well. Might be surprising to some people, but I'm going to put him there. All right, so we got Jimmy the Great next, and like most playing bosses, I didn't find him too difficult, but for he has a lot of phases. The penultimate phase of his is actually pretty difficult, especially if you're gonna get an S rank. But for normally, I'd say that Jimmy the Great isn't too bad. Again, I don't think he is easier than Baroness von Bon Bon though, because it does get a bit of getting used. There's a bit of RNG as well with that attack where the chest opens in his first phase. That can be actually kind of difficult to dodge. I'm gonna put him at mid and the toughest boss so far that I've ranked, and in mid, but a little bit harder than Baroness von Bon Bon. All right. So, what are your boss? Beating this guy on regular is not easy because of that feather attack can throw quite some people off. Alright, I think that this guy for now, 2 boss is pretty difficult. However, beating him on regular, it's not the hardest thing ever. I'd still, this might be unpopular, but I'm gonna put him at mid as well. But harder than Jimmy the Great, definitely. Alright, so we're gonna go to Grim Matchstick next. And this guy's final phase is kind of tough. But if you have the lobber, if you know the weapons to use, you can hit him and completely drain his HP away. You have to be smart about this. Using the lobber is very useful for Grim Matchstick. However, I do think the Green Matchstick is hard for an L2 boss, but it doesn't matter. L2 boss, that isn't the overall game. If I'm going to look at a game and if I'm going to look at returning to the game, beating Green Matchstick wouldn't be too difficult for me as well. I'm probably going to put him on mid, but harder than Wally Warbles, in my opinion. I'm going to put him on mid. So we're going pretty linear right now on this list. We've got Rumor Honeybottoms next. Now, Rumor Honeybottoms, it's strange with the vertical scrolling of the area. I think that's a bit interesting how that goes. It's hard to get used to that part 100%. And I think Rumor Honeybottoms can kind of pose some problems. Though I didn't find them too difficult as well compared to, I don't know, the harder bosses in the game. I feel like I'm not going to put this on kind of hard. I still feel like I'm going to put this on mid. And I don't know, mids, but is she harder than Wally Warbles? Is she harder than Grim Matchstick? I think so. I think so, right? That's final phase of hers. It's not too easy to dodge the the hand bombs that are flying around. I'm gonna put her on mid as well. All right, then we go to Captain Briny Beard here, and this guy is actually gave me a bit of trouble when I was trying to complete the game on regular. I had I think 2 deaths on this guy, and yeah, I am a player that's returning from 2017. I did beat the game in 2017 and went for the expert clears, though I never really got to it. But now I'm replaying the game recently. These are my opinions right now. So Captain Briny Beard, I actually think this guy isn't too hard at all, right? I think he's definitely easier than Wally Warbles. So I'm going to be putting him on mid as well, but I'm going to be putting him before Wally Warbles. He's not too difficult for me. All right, so we got Calamaria next. And Calamaria can actually be difficult because of her petrification attack. You know, when she turns you into stone, it's hard to get out of it, especially if you're on console. You know, you have to find the strategies to go to the top right of the screen once she does the petrification attack. The last phase is actually kind of long as well. So I think I'm going to put her on kind of hard, and I respect Calamaria for that. I think she's kind of hard for a boss as well. Right, Werner Veerman. I thought this guy was going to be a pushover when I first fought him. I thought he was going to be easy for 3 boss. And most people might think that. However, I did not. I actually thought he was actually kind of hard for this one. Because the cat phase is really long, right? And the first phase is a little bit easy to get hit to. You really need to parry and dash at the appropriate time here. So I'm going to be putting Werner Bremen at kind of hard, but at the lowest point of kind of hard. But it is kind of a hard boss. And I just think I struggle more with Werner Bremen than Rumor Honeybottoms. And that second phase is not too easy as well. With all those lollipops going around everywhere, you have to dodge them. Not too easy as well. All right, next up we have Sally Stage Play. And Sally Stage Play is maybe she's got a few phases. She's definitely got like 4 phases, which is more than the average boss. But Sally Stage Play isn't too bad. Especially if you have the DLC, Miss Chalice there, it makes the boss a bit easier because of the invincible rolls you can do to evade most of her attacks in the first and second phases. And so I'm going to be putting Sally Stage Play at mid, and I'm going to be putting her at mid, just there along with Captain Briny Beard. Easier than Wally Warbles, I think, but still there. All right, so we got Phantom Express. The Phantom Express is difficult with all those, pink bars moving your card all around. I think the Phantom Express is definitely kind of hard. It's definitely when the difficulty of the game starts to step up a little bit. The Phantom Express are one of the final bosses. I'm going to put them on kind of hard, harder than Calamaria there. So there, that's where it's going to go. The Phantom Express there. Dr. Cow. Wow, the Dr. Cow on regular. What do you guys think I'm going to say for this one? Yeah, Dr. Cow is difficult. He's definitely one of the more harder bosses of this game, and it's probably going to be in the So Crazy tier. The first phase, it feels like you're getting no progress. You know, you need to get all three of the compartments done, then you need to get the hearts. Then the second phase is the flying head. You need to switch your weapons to the bombs there to hit his head more effectively. It's not easy at all. And the final phase with the crystal and that bullet hell phase, that is a difficult phase, I'm not gonna lie. You have to be really, really good at dodging there to try and get through that mess. But I'm gonna put this Dr. Count So Crazy tier. Absolutely. One of the harder bosses in the game. One of the hardest bosses in the game. Probably the second hardest boss, in my opinion, in the main game. Alright, next up, we're now at Inkwell Hell, the last road of the main game, and we are going to be doing the DLC, as you can see as well there. So King Dice. Now, I actually one-shot King Dice on my return to the game recently, which is pretty surprising, because even if after you start over, you can do the mini bosses aren't too difficult. It's just a very, very lengthy, long battle of endurance of like mini bosses. It's not too easy to do that boss rush. So for King Dice, I'm actually going to be putting him in the kind of hard tier. I don't think he's harder than Dr. Cow. Definitely not, because I didn't really struggle with him much when I was playing him on regular. Not a very difficult boss, even though he has a lot of mini bosses. It's daunting, it's tiring, it's a long boss fight, but it's not too difficult, especially the King Dice. You just have to parry at the right times, and it shouldn't be much of a problem to beat King Dice. Though he is difficult, he's definitely difficult, he's kind of hard, and he's harder than Phantom Express. But he's probably the third hardest boss of the main game, and not the first one, or the second one. Now, for the hardest boss in the game, it absolutely is the devil. It's definitely in the So Crazy. The hardest boss in the main game, absolutely. Because this guy, his first phase is very, very difficult, especially if you don't have Miss Chalice, if you played with Cuphead like me. Getting the timing off the dash correctly, and you don't have any double jumps or anything. Dodging that goat attack is hard. You also need to worry about the RNG. That's, you know, that flame wheel attack where you have the four flames and then one pink parry flame in the middle. That can be difficult as well. And the other bosses down, when you're going down to the underworlds, they're also kind of difficult to complete as well. I'd say it's one of the harder phases in the whole game, those phases at the bottom, because and the very last phase as well, it's a short phase, but it is challenging because the platform is getting smaller and smaller, and it completely restricts your movement. It is a very difficult boss. I took 13 tries, which was insanely, it was way more than all the bosses I did on regular. Alright, so that is all the main game bosses completely. I put a lot of bosses on the mid tier there, as you can see. But let's go to the DLC bosses now. Now, I hadn't played the DLC, of course, because I played this game when it came out, and the DLC came out more recently, only a couple of years ago. So this might be inaccurate. You guys might think the DLC boss is super easy. I might think they're hard, because it's my first time playing. I had more practice with these bosses, so that's why some of them are rated in the mid tier and all that. That some people consider difficult. All right. Right, so when we take a look at this boss here, this is Moonshine Mob, the mob, or Moonshine Mob, this one. And this is the snail that was controlling the anti-teacher at the end. This was a funny boss with that fake knockout. They're not too easy because there's a lot of stuff happening on the screen. It's like an insect hive or whatever. And it's not too easy to dodge this part. And the anti-teacher is a bit confusing sometimes in the last phase. I'm going to put the Moonshine Mob, even though I struggle with them quite a lot, I'm going to be pushing them on the mid tier. I think they're harder than Rumor Honey Bottoms, but they're not too difficult to defeat for DLC boss, you know, for boss in the whole game in general. I think they are difficult. They're more difficult than all those bosses there, as you can see. That's what I found them. Alright, so let's go to the next boss, and that's Esther Winchester, which is the plain boss. I actually one-shot this boss as well blind, which is a bit of a surprise. And I can't say that they're difficult, right? I know there's a lot of stuff happening on the screen. It was kind of a miracle that I one-shot Esther Winchester that easily, but I'm going to be putting Esther Winchester on kind of easy tier. Now, people might be surprised at that. I don't know what people's opinions on the DLC bosses are. I'm going to put that they're easier than Ruby and Croaks, which is a wow, that might be controversial. Who knows? All right, now Glumstone the Giant. I also don't find Glumstone the Giant too difficult. When you have those puppets bouncing the balls around, that is relatively easy to dodge that part. And also with Crackshot, it just gets very OP with Miss Chalice and the crack shot. So I'm also going to be putting Glumstone in this, you know, kind of easy tier, but probably more difficult than Ribby and Croaks. Now, Mortimer Freeze, I'm actually going to respect Mortimer Freeze. He actually gave me quite a bit of trouble, and it was one of the bosses in DLC I found the most difficult, and one of the bosses in general I took the most deaths in. I'm going to be putting Mortimer Freeze in the kind of hard tier, just after Calamaria there. I think Mortimer Freeze is a tough boss. Alright, so next we have the Howling Aces, and the Howling Aces is a boss that maybe a lot of people are going to be finding difficult because of all the tricks, but all the camera rotation, and of course they had to do that in the game. Alright, camera rotation is the hardest part, is the biggest draw, is the biggest, you know, outlier in this boss fight. However, I didn't find it too difficult. I didn't find the camera rotation too difficult. I've seen it in other games, I have a lot of practice with it. So yeah, I'm actually going to be putting the Howling Aces in the mid tier, right? I don't think they're too difficult. I think they could be a problem, but to beat them in regular is not too difficult. I think I'm going to be putting them right here after Jimmy the Great on the mid tier. Maybe my list is very controversial, who knows? Now Saltbaker Chef. I had 2 deaths when I beat Saltbaker Chef. He's not too difficult. Crack shot and Miss Chalice, that's the most overpowered combo for Saltbaker Chef. So I don't know. It's difficult for me to say. And Saltbaker Chef is supposed to be the hardest boss, you know, in the DLC. It's supposed to be the final boss of the DLC. What do I think about this one? I think that's, you know, the final boss, the platforming. I really like the final phase of the platforming. The first phase isn't too difficult for me. I have to say, you know, if you use the invincible roll and your dash is correct, you miss Chalice, you shouldn't have a problem. And Crackshot takes that phase out relatively simply for Saltbaker Chef. However, I don't think he's going to be mid. I think I'm going to have to give him kind of hard because he is kind of hard. There's a lot of things going on the screen, especially with all those salts that are jumping at the screen at you, and that can be kind of tough. So I'm going to put some kind of hard, and I'm going to put it right. I'm going to put him right before Mortimer Freeze. I think Mortimer Freeze is probably the boss I struggled with the most in DLC, even though Mushan Mob was hard for me as well, doing that blind. So yes, guys, that is my tier list. That might be unpopular. Who knows? Tell me what you guys think in the comment section below. I really like doing that. I really like playing Cupheads. The boss is really nice. But of course, playing the DLC bosses blind put some interesting results in there. A lot of people think the DLC bosses are very or maybe a lot of people don't think, but from what I've been seeing online, a lot of people think that the DLC bosses were easy, they weren't that difficult, especially Moonshine Mob might be my most unpopular opinion. But, well, you guys tell me, do you guys agree with this list or not? Tell me what I should have changed there, and tell me if this is a good list or not. If you guys like this video though, please give it a like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you guys very much for watching.